Good afternoon and welcome to the best panel discussion of the day. Yes! I can say that for two reasons. One, because everyone on stage here has either 3 or even 4 decades of experience working in the telecoms industry. And two, it's the last presentation before the bar opens. Okay, so further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the panelists. In the middle here, we have Richard Tang, the rock god of the telecoms world. Famous for his YouTube channel and Wacky Races presentation, which is very popular. To my left here, we have Simon Burckhardt, who's non-executive director of the Comms Council.
I've been a number of board things, and also I used to be CEO of Kelly's, which is a big builder of fibre.
Yep. And on the least but not least is we have the ever so smiling Lee Sutch. Lee Sutch is the head of the business division of Freedom Fibre, Freedom being one of the altnets vying to be one of the last man standing. Okay, so let's kick off. Consolidation. It's been battered around ever since the start of the altnet. So my question to you is that we've all been talking about that the altnets are going to reduce from 100 down to 5 to 6 by the time of 2030. But where do you think we are? Are we ahead of the game? Are we behind? Or where were you expected? I'd like to ask Richard first.
Where are we? Yeah. In terms of where we are, I guess it depends what your expectations are. There are varying views of how long the consolidation will take. My view is it will definitely take to the end of the decade. It won't be done by the end of the decade. There'll still be 2 or 3 major players vying for position. I think into the 2030s, it will all consolidate down to 1. And then there'll still be some, there's a question for the niche rural players. So the likes of Barn, I really hope they go on forever because they're doing a great job. They've got a different business model. I think there's a place for those.
Fantastic. Simon?
Yeah, I think we're behind. To your direct question, I think people thought consolidation would happen much quicker. And I think, as you pointed out from some of the comments, I think Jeremy's quote about the state of the balance sheet is probably the most relevant thing. So I think, there are very big altnets, some of whom are quoted on there, who owe, over 3 billion to the banks. Yeah. And if they're going to consolidate, they're going to have to pay whoever they consolidate with their shares. And with a balance sheet like that, it's difficult to value the shares. So I think that's going to be a real structural problem for some of the consolidation that will happen. So I think at the moment, most of the consolidation is happening where there's a common shareholder or there's a particular common interest. That makes perfect sense. And I think after that, it'll be interesting to see who wins. I do think that Netomnia and Jeremy are in a really strong position. They have such a strong driven platform. It's very interesting. But they're playing against 2 very, very big, well-funded players in Openreach and Nexfibre VMO2, which will be tough. So I think behind the curve, I think you're right. There'll be some niche rural players, maybe some niche B2B players. And when you say one, I presume you mean one as well as Openreach, not hopefully just one monopoly.
Yes.
Yes, good. Yeah.
Or so, maybe a collection of small niche rural players. But look, I've said before, I think the challenge for niche rural players is it's going to be a tough challenge to compete against Openreach's "We will build everywhere" philosophy, because at the moment they've not had to compete with Openreach.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think his point he made there, that he gets his market share, Clive gets his market share from where they don't have coverage, was really telling. But I think the trick is, if you're an altnet, is to get your market share up. That's why they're focused on it now. The fact that Graham Oxby is talking about 45% penetration in his old cohorts is really interesting. And if you've got that, it's quite difficult for Openreach to take customers off them. I think that's the interesting thing.
If I could ask you, as of representing Freedom Fibre, one of the altnets vying for position in the league table, how would you think, what's Freedom's perspective on consolidation?
I think it's an interesting point. What we are seeing is, I think the pace has slowed down. Does that mean conversations are not happening? Absolutely not. I think conversations are happening, conversations are going on. We have seen some pretty sizable mergers at the start of this year. I think we'll see some more as the year goes through. I think it'll be a 2 to 3 year. We'll start to see some proper consolidation. I think the important thing is it's not a willingness to merge, it's an agreement, to your point, Simon, it's an agreement on the value of the assets, the value of the shares, and the altnets between them reaching an agreement on the value that they can bring. But it ultimately is all down to what will drive the merge. What will drive a merge is the value, a perceived value, a go-to-market, because it's a lot of the altnets have stopped building, and they've stopped building because there's a high cost. There's a high cost on debt. Customer take-up numbers need to be higher. So I think the consolidation will come on those 2 points.
That leads to the next good question is really, I mean, we all live and breathe telecoms.
Yeah.
But how do you think it's perceived by the man in the street, the consumer? And also, let's say, are businesses aware of altnets?
I think consumers are confused because Openreach pulled that wonderful trick of calling their fibre to the cabinet, which I confused everybody in terms of whether people had fibre or not. I have discussions with friends in the town I live where they say, I've got fibre. And I said, no, you haven't. And they go, yes, I have. And so I think there is confusion at that front, and that slowly will change, I think. I think businesses know what is available with fibre, and I think they know it's interesting because their traditional connectivity products are often very expensive, so they can see the beauty of it. I think, I don't know, you'll know more than I will, Lee, but the problem is then provisioning it in a holistic way, I think.
Yeah. I think there is an awareness challenge, and to your point, there's a lot of consumers out there that already think they have fibre, but they've got fibre to the cabinet, or they have a variant of it. And there's not the government push that we had. I saw in one of the speeches earlier around the digital TV, the analog switch off of the digital TV change. And I think this industry needs that push. We're still finding a lot of altnets are selling on price proposition. And it's actually not a price proposition. When you look at the future-proof technology and the advantages that you can get on a full fibre network, and actually there's a network that's being retired. So it's a fait accompli that at some point you will need to switch supply. But I think we're still caught in this price push in our industry.
There seems to be like a mentality of all altnets, focusing on the residential build. But we all know that altnets, the driver to succeed in this industry is selling to business. But if I was a business with multiple offices around the country, why would I want to choose an altnet who only specialise in a particular region?
What you need is an aggregator.
And it just so happens that Zen has an ambition to be that UK aggregator of choice. We're on that. But yeah, that is a big challenge at the moment because companies with businesses around the country don't want to be doing deals with lots and lots of different companies for a few circuits here and a few circuits there. So yeah, absolutely. The need is there, and it is a window of opportunity need because by the end of the decade, the consolidation will mean that window is gone. But that's a lot of years and a lot of business to be had.
On a serious point, I don't just think it's multi-offices. It's actually some really basic stuff. And I'm on the board of 2 businesses that tries to on-sell fibre. And often the actual data of what's RFS in business premises is not always ideal. And then the customer experience of the implementation and the actual connection of that business to the network, because it's often different from a residential one, is often very poor as well. So I think it's actually getting the customer experience right in the altnets for businesses that needs to be improved, as well as the data.
Yeah, that's very true, isn't it? Because being as an aggregator, you've got to combine all these networks together. Yeah. And if they're all consolidating, it does come with a lot of pain.
It's a lot of work, and we've scaled up our software development function from 60 people to 100 people as one of the factors to address the amount of work that is needed to do that. So we see the opportunity to do that for sure. And look, on the question of how aware are customers, customers are very aware when their internet doesn't work, isn't fast enough, or it's not reliable enough. And certainly Openreach stats show that full fibre is about 3 times more reliable than fiber to the cabinet or ADSL. So there's a reliability question as well as the speed question there. And for businesses, again, looking at OpenReach, there has been a focus on residential build, and that means a lot of businesses are still on fiber to the cabinet. And in fact, we have a chunk of our businesses that can still only get ADSL today. Yeah. They're very aware that they've got a connectivity that is substandard. It's not up to what they need. They're desperate for full fiber. They can have a leased line, but that's really expensive. So there's a big market opportunity. And companies like ITS have seen that opportunity and are providing B2B connections with a great deal of success.
Yeah. What I would say, think about some of the pain issues we have here is there's also, as you said, if these networks are being knitted together, there's one thing which is quite apparent at the moment. There doesn't seem to be that much standardization. I know, obviously with Freedom and Neil McCarthy, whatever, has always been banging on about, say, standardization. Do you think standardization is needed, and should it be a major priority?
Certainly from an integrator perspective, it's not uniform. So integrating with Truly is a bit different to integrating with Freedom Fibre, which was a bit different with City Fibre. It's a bit different to OpenReach. Having said that, the underlying thing that we're providing is full fibre broadband. So there are lots of similarities. We want to provide a service. We want to cease service. We want to upgrade and downgrade a service. We want to log faults. So what we found is there is that degree of commonality. And in fact, Whale from Strategic Imperatives with his Fibre Cafe offering has done a lot of work to try and standardize the APIs of various different altnets with some success. So yes, it's not all uniform, and there are differences. It's sort of part way to standardization. The other thing that we find is, particularly, for example, integrating with Truly, we were their first national scale ISP customer. So we were a bit of a guinea pig, and they're developing the service with us helping them to do that. And City Fibre was the same when we integrated with them in 2022. One of the guys in Zen said, well, City Fibre are just like a big startup in terms of the way they're operating. Now they're much more refined, but companies need to go through that journey. But in a way, that it keeps it interesting.
Yeah. And from a Freedom perspective, how have you coped?
I think that there's a couple of layers, Mark, of standardization. And the first layer of standardization is where we integrate with other businesses, because all of the altnets, it's a pretty new industry if we think of it. So for an infrastructure build, a lot of the altnets have set to build their network slightly different. So there's different terminology. We'll qualify an RFS ever so slightly different, and premises passed. So there's a whole smorgasbord of terminology that we need to align. So when we're talking about altnets converging, we do need to kind of get our message straight internally. When we're talking about delivering to aggregators and to partners, there is definitely a slight disconnect in some of the systems that are used, some of the KCI messaging, and we've recognised that. So under the guise of Inca, a number of the altnet members have recognised that we need standardisation. So Inca have kickstarted which you'll be pleased to know, a wholesale programme where there's a number of the members that are contributing to standardising some of the services. And that is the key to helping the altnets scale and get to market and gain more customers.
Yeah. Do you think there's enough skilled workers, as in fibre installers, out there? Because when you think about it, a lot of the training for these guys, there's a lot of them being trained on overhead, underground, and then they've been focused on an OpenReach infrastructure. But as we've said, all these different altnets have different protocols and connecting together. Do you think there should be some standardization with the fibre installers as well?
Simon, you're the most qualified to answer that.
I don't think there's a shortage of fibre installers, absolutely not. Kelly's would turn out up to 150 new fibre installers a week. And the training course is 2 weeks plus a 4-week budding session. I think one of the benefits of a lot of the altnets using PIA is that the underlying infrastructure using the, if anyone doesn't understand what PIA is, it's the passive, it's the ducts and poles that belong to OpenReach. They actually do provide some standardisation themselves. So I don't think there's a workforce problem on installers because we can train and recruit those pretty simply and easily. In the case of Kelly's at OpenReach, we do 7,000 or 8,000 tasks a week just for them, and we do 100% of City Fibre on top of that. So I don't think that's an issue. And the training is it's a lot easier than training electricians, and I think that's going to be a big issue for this country in going green, is having enough Sparkies around, for example.
Yeah, I suppose that leads into the sort of next question as well, because when altnet started out, it was about there's the money to grow as fast and as far as you can, which was absolutely great. RFS is ready for service is great, but as we know now, as the industry's changed, the industry inflation's gone up, it's all about connections. But the problem is now is that there's this called the Swiss cheese effect. You can have house premises on one side of the street which are connected with full fibre, and the other side there's nothing. It's still only old technology. How do you think the industry can address that Swiss cheese effect?
I guess that one of the drivers for the altnets is most RFS for lease money, and certainly Netomnia is deliberately taken that view so that it can build to as many premises as possible with the budget that it's got. And I suppose it then gives that competitive advantage on the side of the street that's not built. There is a competitive opportunity for a company that is willing to build there. Yeah. So different altnets have been playing games with each other, actually, in terms of, in some cases, even pretending to build somewhere and then not building to keep another altnet away from that area. OpenReach. When I asked Clive about this a year or so ago, he said OpenReach doesn't take any notice of what's there currently. Unlike the altnets, they're just ploughing ahead. They're going to build everywhere. But actually, the other altnets absolutely do flex their plans. In some cases, they plan and spend money to build an area, and another altnet beats them to it, and they will withdraw. In some cases, they will overbuild a little bit. And then in some cases, they play bits of games with each other to screw little plastic boxes to poles, almost like the Germans putting the towel on the lounges.
I think that's absolutely true. And I think it's to the points you were making earlier about the comments from from the CEOs about the different market share they get from their old cohorts, and particularly Clive's comments about the market share that he loses where he hasn't got fibre yet, is made to that point. I think an interesting area, actually, that doesn't get talked a lot about, and I saw Clive, I think it was 2 years ago at Connected Britain, talk about this, is actually things like blocks of flats, MDUs and stuff, where it's really difficult to just get permission to get in them. And he was talking about, there being a kind of grey zones in city centres where they aren't big blocks of flats, they're flats with 5 flats in them, and they just can't even find the landlord. I think that's going to be an area where there's been lots of underserved customers.
Yeah, if I can come in on that as well, and I think what altnets have been doing, whilst the cash has been rich, is they've been building out and building out and building out. And we have a saying at Freedom Fibre: we spend it like it's our own. So we do not overbuild. We do not build where there's another altnet. It's investors' cash. At some point, we realise that where networks converge, we are possibly going to be working with the same investors. So we're very cautious about that. But what you'll find a lot of altnets are now looking inward, and certainly at Freedom, we're looking at our current build, and we're looking at where we can squeeze additional RFS, because it's cost effective to go across the street because the network's already in place, the PIA is already there. So what you will find is a lot of altnets are actually trying to fill those holes in the Swiss cheese.
I mean, or the block of flats you couldn't get a way leave to first time, exactly that kind of thing.
The challenge on the block of flats, that's a fair point, but the challenge is way leave, and Wayleave has bogged a lot of the altnets, and we are starting to look at that now. So we look at the amount of MDUs and properties that we can serve, and these are, again, in underserved properties. So the attention turns from the expensive outbuild to the inbuild and to
Last week, for example, the government announced the launch of the 23 million UK Telecoms R&D fund. Now, do you think that, is it the altnets or the aggregators should be working, maybe collaborating, with maybe some of the 5G, the mobile operators, to plug this Swiss cheese gap?
I don't want to be rude, but when one of the notable altnets has a balance sheet missing of 3.6 billion,
Wow.
23 million, I mean, it's just not going to make any difference, is it? So, but I mean, of course, it's a good idea. I mean, if they can.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I would say is that, as I said in my presentation, we've got the best free market competition ever. So I think that 23 million shouldn't be used at all to fill in bits of RFS that free market competition will fill in, but use it to research into, optimizing fibre transmission or the technology.
I know
itself.
we're running out of time at the moment, but I'd just like to ask one question of you all. If you would give one piece of advice to a channel partner, how would you evaluate the provider today, and what would it be? How would you choose which altnet to work with?
I think for most people here today, most channel partners go through an aggregator, because a lot of the altnets themselves have said publicly, we don't want to be dealing with hundreds of different channel partners. We want to deal with a few key ISPs, and the channel partners go through the ISPs.
Yeah.
I think one thing people forget, and they talk about their fragmented altnets, other than your good self and the top five, who I believe have something like 92% of residential market share, three of them are either owned by BT or Virgin. So there's only like two or three in play. The ISP market is very, very fragmented. And once you get past you, there's hundreds of tiny ones. So the idea of working with altnet, it becomes really tricky. And I think your point is well made. An aggregator does make sense, I think.
So I think the key message there is it's working with aggregators. Yeah. Okay.
Or freedom.
Well, I would always say work with aggregators. Absolutely. My advice, my takeaway for anyone looking to work with altnet is looking to partner with altnet is look at altnets that understand what customers are looking for, what your business customers are looking for. It's a different mentality than a consumer service. You need to work with an altnet that understands the service level, understands, and the one key takeaway I want people to take away from this session is that the B2B benefits that the network is built on, the alternative network and fibre is built on, can bring some great advantages against typical EAD services. And I want to use the word future-proof, and I don't want to, it's quite a corny phrase, but the way this industry is moving, it can future-proof a business and give benefit against Ethernet and the 5.5 million customers that are currently using FTTP to run the business. But I would definitely say work with an altnet that understands B2B and understands your customers' needs in the future.
The key thing is that the altnets aren't going to go away. We've all got to work with you, and getting through to those altnets is best using through the aggregators. I know we're running out of time, so I'd like to finish today and thank the panel guests. Okay.
Thank you.
Right now.